I'm going to be looking at a camera that came out in 2016 that has weirdly become one of my favorite cameras to shoot on. It's called the Yi M1. And I want to see if we can get cinematic images and professional looking portraits out of this thing that only costs $100. Let me read you from the description from Amazon, and then I'll give you my description. The Yi M1 mirrorless digital camera is a lightweight, mirrorless, interchangeable lens camera that delivers spectacular image quality through 4K video and 20 megapixel still images using a Sony image sensor. Now here's my description. The Yi M1 is a Leica lookalike micro four thirds camera that produces really good images for the money. It's also insanely difficult to use. It's really not very user-friendly. It has an average at best battery life, and it never received the amount of effort from Xiaomi that would have made it what it could have been. With that being said, I found that the Yi has legitimate uses in professional environments. Plus, this thing is cheap. When it came out, it was billed as a really affordable camera for the specs, but because of the lack of firmware upgrades and whatnot, you can find these for next to nothing. My friend Gio just bought one on eBay last week for $95. Seriously, $95 for a 4K camera that actually looks good. So let's take a look at this thing by looking at some of the pros and the cons. Cons first. We're only going to go over 3 of them since the camera is only around $100. You can go and get one and come to your own conclusions about other pros and cons. Number 1, there's no viewfinder and the screen is terrible. When you're shooting with the Yi, you basically have to rely on the meter, otherwise you're in trouble. Exposing on this camera is clunky and difficult because it has this weird feature where it auto exposes on the screen but not the sensor. So even if it looks like it's exposed correctly on the back screen, unless the meter is reading correctly, it likely isn't exposed properly. Number 2, the video options are very limited. There's no dedicated video mode, so you're stuck with using manual photo mode. And then it'll crop into the 16:9 4K sensor, so that's a 1.75 crop, and that makes it really challenging to frame things. Also, it's limited to 24 frames a second and 1080 only, so there's definitely limitations there. Number 3, the video quality is overly sharp and looks extremely digital when using a native micro four thirds lens. I hated the video quality of this camera for years, but when we get to the pros on this list, I think we're gonna find a workaround that'll have a different outcome. So let's go ahead and move to the pros. Number 1, the image quality on this thing is unbeatable for the price. For portraits, paired with a decent lens, the skin tones are extremely good and the highlights have a nice roll off. These images are taken of my wife from several months ago, and I love the way that this camera handles the color contrast as a whole. On the video side of things, I found that this camera looks insanely good when paired with vintage lenses. In this example, I'm using a Helios 33, which is a vintage 35mm Russian lens, and the 4K images turn out velvet-like and very filmy. I don't know what it is about the image quality, but I just really enjoy shooting with this paired with a vintage lens, and it gives me that nice film look. Number 2, this is my go-to camera for time-lapse. As clunky as the interface is, the camera produces some amazing 4K time-lapse video that I use in wedding films all the time. And because of how portable the camera is, and how easily hidden it becomes, these time-lapse videos are easy to set up and they're extremely useful to put into films. Number 3, the price. I know I've mentioned that before, but for just $95, if you can get past the difficulty of using this thing and the quirkiness of it, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a camera that produces better image quality than the Yi 1 for that price. For around $100, to be able to get usable cinematic video and also have a usable time-lapse camera is basically a miracle. So there you have it, the Yi M1 revisited in 2021. Now, I use this on professional sets and on wedding shoots all the time, so to be able to pick one up for $100 and just start shooting with it, I think you might be surprised by the results. Get past the quirks, get past the weirdness of the camera, and you have yourself a $100 package that can produce really, really good images. Check it out.